Project Spiegeltent, officially starting draft 1. Sometimes you just have to get started. About a young woman who works at a fictitious arts festival. I'm really excited to take all of that learning into a new project. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video we are finally beginning the prose of Project Spiegeltent. I'm officially starting draft 1 of the novel in this vlog. Now, if you're aware of this project, this novel that I've been working on, I came up with the idea many years ago. I've been so frazzle-brained working on other projects, other things, and I've been trying to get to this book again and again and again, and it just keeps getting pushed back. Now, I've done other vlogs where I've done research bits, I've done little bits of writing here and there, but basically I have been struggling to get started on this novel. Now, I will also say that I filmed this over mostly the course of a Friday night, but also kind of a weekend where I was quite sick with a cold. Now, you can see in the video that I'm trying very hard to ignore the cold, I'm trying to soldier on, but I've got a lot of fatigue and my throat feels like it has knives in it for the whole video. So if I seem a bit flat and low energy at an increasing velocity throughout this vlog, that is why. I wasn't feeling very well, but I essentially had a Friday night free and I was determined to get started on this novel. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Here is me finally beginning draft 1 of Project Spiegeltent, which is my magical realism, fantasy-esque, fun, don't really know what it is yet, novel. It is currently 8:07 p.m. on the 27th of September, and welcome to this very impromptu vlog in a different location. I am currently looking after my niece. Let me go get her for you. This is my niece, Evie. Here she is. Not blood related, obviously. She is a gorgeous little sweetheart. She does not want to be held. And currently I am cat sitting because her parents are camping. So here we are on a Friday night. Tyler, my partner, is uncharacteristically working really late. So for those of you who don't know, he is a game developer. He's working on some really cool stuff at the moment. And then yesterday I finished reading Normal People by Sally Rooney. And also yesterday we finished watching Succession. We finished the final season. So I'm not currently in the middle of anything. I'm here with Evie and I'm kind of bored. So I think today is the day that we finally start draft 1 of Project Spiegeltent, officially starting draft 1. I got my dinner. We can tuck into this, get started on writing. I think I want to start with kind of like a one-pager on this story. So I'm gonna sit down, write the blurb of this story, do a little bit more planning, and then get started on draft 1. Yay! She is honestly the sweetest cat, loveliest demeanor, very playful, very cuddly. I have been putting off writing this novel for the longest time, and the main reason why I've been putting it off is not because of writer's block. I've just been busy with a lot of other creative projects, and I also find that I have a really long gestation time on novels. It takes me a really long time to get started. The novel that I want to write after Project Spiegeltent, I've also been thinking about for at least 3 years. I'm getting more and more excited for that novel, and that novel is going to be a lot more similar to Project Teacup, but this novel, Spiegeltent, which I have not started yet, I've done the research for, if you guys have watched the previous videos. I've also mentioned that I started the preface of that, so the prologue. So I did the prologue. I now hate it. I'm gonna throw it in the bin instead of get on the prologue. That's fine, that's just a part of my process. But I have not gotten started on it because I've been working on other creative projects and it's been a very busy time. However, as I said, it's a Friday evening. Evie and I are hanging out. I'm not in the middle of consuming any particular book or TV show because we just finished. This is my fault for sitting on the floor. Honestly, I just need to get started with it. So here I have a document which is quite old. This is an old blurb that I had. It's an old title. I don't think either are strong enough. And for me, one of the big things about the blurb is that it's just a basic premise for the story. It's your basic selling point. I kind of like an idea of how the book is going to be positioned, what kind of vibe it is. And I've told this story before, but the entire reason I like having the title and the blurb before I get started on a novel is because when I wrote the very first novel I ever wrote, I ended up spending 8 years on it. I went through so many things in that time, and the novel kept getting delayed, and I put so much of my heart and soul into it, and I finally queried it in 2020 to a great amount of failure. It went really badly. I obviously didn't get an agent back in 2020. I got an agent last year. I also almost just poked myself in the eye with this chip. Yeah, that first novel didn't go very well, and one of the main reasons it didn't go well is because I spent so much time on the prose of the story, on the plot twists. I made all of these things really like complex and compelling, and it was a novel that I wanted to be like a 5-part series. I had riddled out all of the little things that were going to happen later on in the series, but I massively tripped at the first hurdle because A, I didn't have a good title, which is absolutely forgivable. You can change a title quite easily, but B, which is far worse, I didn't have a good blurb for the story. Like, there wasn't a compelling one-liner, there wasn't anything interesting to grab anyone. You can kind of tell when novels struggle with having interesting stakes up front, because if you read the blurb and it kind of reveals the 75% twist of a story, it means that that story is quite hard to market. Like, when you read enough blurbs, you realize that there is a very specific structure to them. You've got this character in this status quo, this is what's happening to them, but and therefore and there'll be something about the stakes of the story. This is where they are and this is the conflict, right? And so my first novel just didn't have that. And so like when I started writing Project Teacup, I was very, very adamant on having a good compelling title and having a good compelling blurb. And if you have a strong blurb, the blurb is only going to really reveal the first like 30% of the story, right? It's only going to be the first little bit. And so the way I kind of look at it is that like the blurb and the title are kind of the like creative brief that I'm writing for myself. Maybe it's the commerce degree / marketing career that I had that's also doing this to me. Anyway, I'm gonna buckle down here. I'm gonna eat my food. I'm going to finalize this blurb and then do some planning. What are you doing, miss? This is my fault for putting this on top of your toy. I'm very sorry. I now have my blurb all written, which is very exciting. I think I've written this blurb for Project Spiegeltent maybe like 5 times now. I think I'm finally happy with it. I've mentioned a number of times before that my process is really, really iterative, and it's always been incredibly iterative, no matter if it's like painting or like A Year in Tōkyō, which is the illustrated guide and memoir I published 2 years ago. Even with that project, I started it and then scrapped it and then started it and scrapped it so many times. And it is a ridiculous way to work, Miss Evie. Just the way that my brain works creatively. Anyway, maddening, but we got there in the end. I now have the blurb for the story. So I've got what I think is my title. So I think, no, don't scratch that, no. I'm hopeful that I've finally nailed I don't think she's supposed to be in there. Like this is not my home, but I feel like I should stop you. But I feel like I've nailed the vibe, so I'm really, really happy. And I wanted to write a story that's kind of gently gothic, a bit whimsical, a bit fun, told about a young woman who works at a fictitious arts festival, like a creepy, massive arts festival. Even though I worked in the arts, and the arts famously doesn't pay very much money, there's a lot of privilege when you get into the arts scene, and that really fascinates me. When I'm doing the writing routine videos, I always end up talking about economics and class and how these things affect our ability to create art, because it's something that I get stuck on all the time because of my context. I'm sorry, I'm so distracted. I'm just making sure that Evie's like fine. I love pets. I love being around pets, so I'm obsessed. But I think that the way that money and class and background affects people's ability to participate in art, I think is really interesting and really important. That is one of the things I'd ideally like to explore with this novel. I'd love to look at art and beauty and aesthetics with this story. But again, I want to write something that doesn't take itself too seriously. We have the blurb, we have the key themes, we have the title. I'm now going to open up Milanote and get started on some like last minute prep stuff, which wonderfully brings me to the sponsor of this video, which is Milanote. Milanote is an absolutely fabulous tool that you can use to plan your own creative projects. I've been working with Milanote for a while now, and I absolutely love using it for planning my short stories and novels. It is the ideal tool for me because I'm very visually minded. I love how portable Milanote is. I love that I can just take it with me on my phone or my my tablet. It means that there are absolutely no barriers between me and working on the planning of my projects. So you may have seen this particular board before. It's a board that I made a few months ago, which I've been tweaking and adding to as I've been going along with Project Spiegeltent. This main board here kind of acts like a project hub for Spiegeltent. I have all of my resources here. So today I needed to use my structure boards, which are my outline, plot, and world building boards. So kicking it off with plot, this is something that I'm just kind of loosely laying down. I've got a structure here of about 13 chapters that I'm working with. I don't know if the book is going to be 13 chapters, but we will see. I've got this picture of a paper pigeon, which I'm using to help color code everything. Now that I'm done with plot, I'm moving along to outline, where I'm popping down all of the high level notes. Again, the color coding here and the creation of visually cohesive notes is really, really important for me. If things are visually overwhelming, if things are boring, I'm not going to be super motivated to go back to them. I like things being clear. And then my final board here today is a fun one. It's world building. I'm just adding down some more notes, some information. World building is something that I'm going to develop as the story goes along, so I'll keep popping back to this board. I've got a map of Adelaide, which is where the story is going to be set. I've got some pictures here to set the scene, and just some very early notes on the world and the story here. Millernote has heaps of templates to choose from, which makes it really easy to get started with planning. It just reduces that cognitive load of not knowing where to start. So I love that function of Millernote. You can also share your boards with other collaborators. There's a web clipping tool, which is super useful for research. I love Millernote. I think it's an absolutely amazing resource for storytellers and for creatives. Millernote is available for free with no time limit. You can go ahead and sign up for a free Millernote account by clicking the link in the description down below. It is now currently 9:21 p.m. My last minute planning stuff is done. I have nothing holding me back, and it's this kind of scary thing, and I mentioned this in the writing video that I put up on Patreon last week, where someone asked me, like, what do you do if you don't know where to start with a novel? Sometimes you just have to get started. And I also tend to do this thing where sometimes I feel like I don't have the things that I need. Like, I always feel like I could be doing more research or I could be doing more learning, but sometimes you've just got to get started anyway. Even though it's tough, even though it's anxiety provoking, the blank page is very, very scary. But the thing is that your first draft does not need to be perfect. It doesn't even need to be good. It just needs to be done, right? I can't remember if I actually shared my specific plans with you guys at the beginning of the year, but I had planned to do the draft for Project Spiegeltent back in like March or April, but life happened. I got sick so much this year. I'm actually sick right now. Like, I don't know if you guys can hear. It's been really frustrating again because I keep getting sick this year, and I had so many sinus problems, and Project Teacup ended up being more work than I had intended, and just a whole bunch of stuff happened. But that is life, and that is fine, and that happens sometimes. It would feel like such an achievement to get a draft of this story done this year. I've learned so much this year about writing, you know, now being a writer with a literary agent, getting feedback from industry professionals, going through the querying process. I have learned so much, and so I'm really excited to take all of that learning into a new project. I just know that for me as a writer, I need to be really careful not to be impatient with myself. I need to write in such a way that the first draft doesn't take over my life, because when I start a new project, I tend to get a little bit obsessive and just like zero in on things. But obviously, if you're doing that all the time, it can be really disruptive to your other things, such as your job and your other work and cat sitting your niece, who is down there. I'm gonna do like 500 words, and then I'm gonna go sleep for like 10 hours because I am still ill. So even though I seem very tired and flat in this video, I am actually having a really good time writing the early bits of the story. I feel like the words are coming to me really, really easily. I'm having fun with this kind of sassy, sarcastic voice that I've got going on so far. You know, this person is quite scathing of one of her co-workers, and essentially in this passage that I wrote, she's just kind of drilling down into why she doesn't like this person. And I feel like you can find out a lot about a character based on what they like, but also especially what they don't like about other people. So yeah, I don't feel great by this point of the vlog, but the story is actually happening really quite quickly, which is quite surprising because I feel like with this story, every little bit so far has been pulling teeth. I feel like I'm kind of drawing from an empty well a bit, and so that probably indicates to me that I need more time for research. I need more time to fill that well. But here is Evie being a little bit mischievous, but also there's a bit of balance there, because sometimes you're not going to have all of those tools that you think that you need, and you just need to get started. And as I've mentioned again and again, my process is so iterative, and it's important for me to remember sure that even if I write a prologue and throw it out, even if I write this first chapter and throw it out, those are all essential words that I need to write in order to get to the story that I'm trying to tell. So the story is actually happening really quickly, which is interesting. I mean, obviously I've been thinking about it for a really long time. I came up with the concept for this story back in like 2020. So like it's been on my mind for quite a while. I kind of want to try something different with this novel compared to the last one. Like the last one was very, very complex. It's ended up being like 120,000 words for Project Teacup, and it's this huge sprawling novel, which is really complex. So for Spiegeltent, I want it to be like 75,000 words. I really want to set myself the challenge of writing not a simpler novel, not like easier, but a more concise novel, a shorter novel, which is just going to focus on one character's point of view. And yeah, the voice feels quite easy because I don't really have the character's voice yet, and so it's not dissimilar from my speaking voice, whereas the voice for Project Teacup, as I've mentioned before a number of times, is a much more formal 1920s inspired fantasy-esque voice. It's very like pretty and lyrical, and for this story it's going to be a lot more similar to the type of like non-fiction writing I did so much when I was a travel writer. Her personality is going to be a lot different than mine. I think I'm going to make her very comfortably middle class. She's going to be a person who has grown up with like very, very educated parents who are thinking of making her parents like university lecturers, and I'm thinking of doing that so that I can use her to explore a lot of like really interesting, not academic ideals, but like I really want her to have a background in art history. I really want her to have this presumption that it's easy to get into the arts. So that's going to be quite a different perspective than like the perspective that I came from. So I want it to be kind of sarcastic, so I'm looking forward to developing the humor here. But yes, the story is happening quite quickly. I'm going to keep writing this, we're going to see how we go, and shortly after that I need to go to bed because I am sleepy. I will return to you later, possibly with Evie tomorrow morning when I feed her breakfast. Yes? Yes? You want to say good night? Good night. Yes, I did go back early and feed Evie. This is such a loved cat. She gets fed appropriate amounts, but just at various times throughout the day. She eats twice a day and then she has snacks. I love that for her. So Tyler and I were popping in and out of his little sister's house like throughout the weekend. And honestly, being ill, it was a little bit exhausting running back and forth and also trying to do some writing stuff. I just kind of stopped vlogging along the way, but I did keep writing my story. I've obviously vlogged the important bits of the weekend, which is not the work I'm doing, but it is instead playing with Evie. So I wrote a bunch and then I deleted a bunch and then I wrote a bunch again, and I kind of just felt my way quite slowly. But again, I feel like I'm starting to really find this voice, this kind of what is supposed to be funny but a little bit scathing voice of this young woman who is kind of naive to begin with. Again, the voice of this young woman who is stepping into a world where she's going to eventually discover that things are not what they seem. So she thinks she knows what's going on, but she doesn't actually know what's going on. It's slow going. I think I do need to return to my research soon, but along the way, I think I'm just going to try and push myself to do bits and pieces of this story. But essentially, even though I felt god awful the entire weekend, I managed to get a lot of writing done, and with that, I'm very happy. Hello, Christy from the future, now jumping in to finish this vlog because I ended up in a fugue state for most of the weekend, but also I did manage to do quite a bit of writing. So in the end, draft 1 of the story is sitting at around 3,000 words. I've managed to do a chunk of chapter 1. I ideally want chapter 1 to be around 5,000 words, but I'm not sure if I want the middle chapters to maybe have more words than the beginning chapters just for the sake of the pacing. I'm riddling out that stuff now. I'm sure that none of that matters. I'm sure it's all going to change like later on when I write the story, but these are the kinds of structural things I like thinking about even early on in the story writing process. Yeah, the book is sitting at about 3,000 words. I feel incredibly proud to have just pushed through and gotten those words on a page. Essentially what happened after my very, very productive Friday night where I filmed most of this vlog, got a bunch of work done. I was really sick for the rest of the weekend. You know, the work week went past. The weekend after that, I basically crashed and watched all of the Twilight movies pretty much back to back. I started with the first one, loved it, I haven't watched it in years, and then I don't think I ever finished watching the final Twilight films, even though I love the campiness, like the memeability of the first Twilight movie. Like it's so funny, it's so much much joy and I love it. I'm fine now. I feel great, lots of energy, very good. And I have written around 3,000 words of the novel. Will I keep those words? Hopefully. Hopefully I keep those. Hopefully I just kind of keep going. But honestly, if I delete those words and start again, it's just, again, my iterative process of writing stories. I feel like I have to dismantle and rebuild and dismantle and rebuild until I finally find the right angle to start the novel. I did that with Project Teacup maybe 7 or 8 times over the course of about a year. But I was working full-time in marketing and doing the YouTube channel, and was I doing my masters? I don't think I was doing my masters then, but I think I was still freelance writing maybe. I was doing a bunch of stuff, and so I had less time. I now have more time to work on novel writing stuff, so ideally it's gonna be a lot faster of a process. Once I get past maybe the 5,000 word mark, 10,000 word mark, the rest of the story is going to come quite easily. But because I want to do something very creative with the structure of the book. I did say I wanted to write something easy, but I do want to do something a bit ridiculous with the structure and the way this book is laid out. I think it's going to be a bit of a slow process, but I also feel like I learned so much from Project Teacup that hopefully it won't need the same amount of iteration as my previous novel, which had many, many, many iterations. But anyway, thank you guys so very much for watching this very candid vlog of me beginning Project Spiegeltent. I hope you enjoyed it. And also before I leave, I wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone over on Patreon for supporting my videos. Over there, we have a whole bunch of lovely bonus content, bonus videos, our book club, our Discord server. I post writing updates, so much lovely bonus content over there to say thank you to my patrons for supporting what I make. And if you'd like to check out Patreon, there's a link in the description down below. Take care everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.